Good evening and welcome to the overnight edition of From Day One. Art Bell's ready with us tonight with Warren Hadley on the topic of storm chasing. So, 25 time zones around the world. Here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Art Bell.
High desert and the great American Southwest. I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world's 25 prolific time zones. Each and every one covered like a blanket by this program, Midnight in the Desert. My name is Art Bell. The rules of the road are so simple. No bad language. Don't need it. And only one call per show. Max. Hey, has anybody noticed that the advertisements for Windows 10 are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger? I've got like 7 computers with, Windows 7 on it. And, which I'm contented with, but, they're tempting me. They're trying to get me to hit that button. And I'm resisting with all my willpower. But I've noticed that as I continue to resist, the messages get bigger. They started out a little tiny thing on the taskbar, and then they were a little tiny thing that popped up a little bit, and then they were a bigger thing that popped up. I had one that came up and covered the whole screen the other day. Do it and do it soon! All right, so the news of the day. The first thing I'm going to read you is not news of the day. This is a pretty freaky story, and let me tell you about it. It came to me from a nurse, and I know her name, and we know how to reach her, but I will not give you her name for privacy reasons. We also know who the patient is here, or we're on her trail. My producer is trying to produce this. This was sent to me by the nurse, and so without naming her, hi Art, I just wanted to tell you about a patient that I recently had in the ER. It was a young mother who had already presented twice previously since confirming pregnancy 10 weeks ago. On those visits, she said she felt uneasy about her pregnancy and was concerned for the baby's well-being. Each time, we did blood work and an ultrasound to confirm that everything was as it should be. On the third visit, she presented to ER, stating that she just didn't feel pregnant, and could we please ensure that everything was okay. Upon obtaining blood work, her HCG levels were those of a non-pregnant woman. Her pelvic ultrasound revealed no fetus, no evidence of any recent pregnancy. We knew this was not correct because we had done recent ultrasound showing a live single fetus within the uterine cavity. This time, though, there was no fetus present. The patient did not show any signs or symptoms of miscarriage. Just quit feeling pregnant. Well, as you can imagine, she was apprehensive about this pregnancy right from the start, and now the pregnancy had vanished. A documented and photographed via ultrasound fetus was now missing with no signs of where it went. I couldn't help but immediately think of your guest, Dr. Jacobs, that would be, talking about the hybrids and hybrids. Could this be a case of a pregnancy that was removed from the mother, as your guest had suggested? Sure sounded eerily familiar. So, as you can imagine, we are working on this case. That doesn't happen. Fetuses don't just vanish. HCG levels back to normal. Doesn't happen. So this was the nurse, and again, we're going to keep her name for now private. as well as, of course, the patient. We can't go another step now, really, without the patient's permission or interview. So now, looking at a little news of the day, the Elbows Out GOP presidential contest appeared on Wednesday to have entered a kinder, gentler phase. Kind of 11, like the 11th commandment had taken hold. Jeb Bush was a little more energetic, I thought. Rubio did very well. He's probably the one in waiting, in my opinion. Rubio's the guy, I bet you. We'll see. Anyway, it was an okay debate. The Donald didn't say too much. The international community is mounting its most serious effort yet to end the nearly 5-year-old Syrian war, rallying around a second round of talks in Vienna this weekend amid the emergence of a Russian proposal that calls for early elections. I shouldn't laugh. Have you seen the state of Syria? Elections? Are they serious? Anyway, they're going to talk about it, and they should. There have been 250,000 people killed so far. But it's got the brew of the Third World War in there, I think. The latest from the IAAF investigation, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered an investigation immediate into the allegations of widespread doping among that country's sports figures. I shouldn't laugh at that either, I guess, right? And this, of course, we've had this on the website, but from theanomalous.com, hold your horses, true believers. Every journalist and their cat are monitoring the threads at NASA's Eagle Works to scoop the competition, and Rick Stella is no different. The long and short of this announcement is a peer-reviewed paper based on a new experiment, which is pending. And it's very certain to knock our collective socks off any time soon. What it is, folks, is an EM drive. An EM drive breakthrough. It looks like it actually works. I wonder how long NASA will test it before they will finally actually declare that it works. We may not know how, but it works. In fact, even a plucky Romanian did, with some measure of success, build one. So we may be on the verge of a backyard space program. I wonder who will launch first. The subject tonight is timely in the sense that there are very violent storms going on tonight across Illinois, Iowa, probably mainly Missouri overnight. It's a mess, and it's late in the year for that mess, and our guest will be able to comment on it for sure, since he chases storms. No, he's not crazy. It is a true, absolute straight line to all the adrenaline a human can use. We'll talk about it in a moment. But I do want to say one thing. NBC News tonight, in covering the violent weather, they had cameras, of course, in Iowa because they were doing political coverage, right? And, again, here I go laughing, but God, it was a funny sight. They had this young gal, I guess probably a political reporter, right? And the tornado sirens were going off, as in, get the hell out of here and go find shelter right now. I mean, you could hear the siren screaming in the background, which is, I assume, why they turned on the camera. But in the background, she was standing right in front of a Jeb Can Fix It sign. Again, I shouldn't laugh, but she, her face was worried, and the siren was going off. She's probably imagining, a mile-wide tornado bearing down on their building, and it had to be right in front of a Jeb Can Fix It sign. All right, so it has been too many years since I've interviewed this man, and I suspect he's as crazy as ever. Warren Bailey was the first person to pursue severe weather and natural disasters in a full-time capacity as a journalist, consultant, cinematographer, of course, and photographer. He's been labeled as America's top Storm Chaser, and that's quite a title. And America's storm survival expert by multiple media outlets. You have very likely seen Warren on news programs, CBS's early show, the BBC, O'Reilly Factor, CNN, Fox News, and so much more, reporting on severe weather. As a full-time extreme weather journalist, forecaster, and storm survival expert, so who knows, we might save a life tonight. Warren has likely experienced more assorted severe weather and natural disasters than any living human being. And believe me, his adventures, deadly encounters, could fill volumes. They will fill 3 hours tonight. It's adrenaline junkie's dream to chase storms. I did it when I was young and stupid, I know. But I sure am still very, very interested in it. We're going to break here, and when we come back, Warren Faithley.
On the wild side of midnight, from the kingdom of Nye, this is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CRAWL.
That's it, all right. Warren Faithley is my guest coming up. He's a storm chaser. It is said he is the best of the storm chasers. Welcome to Midnight in the Desert, Warren.
Good to be here.
We did interview, I think you and I talked back, you said, in 2002?
I believe so. I think it was, 2002, a long time ago.
Yeah, painful to think about all that time. Anyway, you're still alive. That's on the bright side.
Yeah, a lot of close calls since then, but fortunately, I've been both lucky and smart. I don't know which is the more of, but still out there chasing.
I think you need a little of both, actually.
Well, you need a little of both, plus you need to have some kind of a survival instinct. I had that, I was told when I was a journalist, and I think it kind of transitioned into storm chasing. It's probably kept me out of a lot of trouble over the years.
Mm-hmm. Where are you located, by the way?
This time of year, I'm in Tucson, Arizona. This is usually the slowest time of the year for severe weather, although, of course, tonight there's some areas that are getting hit. But generally, this time of year is one of the few times I can actually sit back and not worry too much about chasing.
Are things changing? That's a pretty comprehensive question. When I say are things changing, I mean when we talked in 2002, the tornado season was one thing, the typhoon and hurricane seasons, they were something else. And since 2002, Warren, if you think about it, have things changed?
Well, they have. I mean, the last few years we've seen very little hurricane activity, in the Gulf Coast or the East Coast. And the last probably 4 or 5 years in the Central Plains, there's been somewhat of a tornado drought, although it seems like the violent tornadoes that do occur somehow seem to find humanity. But beyond that, the weather, it's drier. We're seeing these massive dust storms, 110 miles north of me up in Phoenix. And we're seeing some of the storms kind of change where you see the violent storms in the plains move a little bit further to the east. So things have changed a little bit, but when you talk about severe weather and the kind of things I chase, which is everything from lightning storms to tornadoes to hurricanes and everything in between, it's pretty much regular occurrence somewhere in the world.
That's true. During the years that I was not talking with you, I lived in the Philippines for quite a number of years. And I lived up at about 190 feet. We were on actually 200 feet. The 19th floor. I still own the condo there in Manila. And my wife, who is Filipino, she said, one day I called her to the window because we would get, very, very violent thunderstorms. And when you're up 200 feet in the air, you really feel it.
Oh, sure.
And one day I said, hey, hon, come here, there's ice falling. She said, no. Ice doesn't fall in the Philippines. I said, look. And there, sitting on the windowsill, were chunks of ice. Very powerful storm. She went, wow, ice. Never seen it in her life.
Yeah, it's very unusual the way the storms form there to have hail, if that's what you're referring to. That's
it was hail.
Tropical areas. Yeah, in tropical areas, that's pretty uncommon. You don't see that very often.
Well, there was rotation going on, too, and not far away they actually had a tornado. So those things occur, although not nearly like we have it here in the U.S.
No. I mean, the U.S. is really the hell machine of the world, especially on eastern Colorado, a little bit further up north into north South Dakota. I mean, that's where you run into sometimes the grapefruit-size hell.
I've done some foolish, maybe not so foolish, and maybe some of it foolish storm chasing myself, as I told you, I think, the first time we interviewed, from Amarillo Air Force Base. Used to chase them up into Oklahoma, actually back then film, sold it to KFDA television in Amarillo back then. And we chased Lynn, who, by the way, went on to be a good friend of mine, went on to be a meteorologist and does TV news in Louisiana. He and I chased tornadoes and storms that were about to issue them all the way up into Oklahoma. So I know a little bit about what you do, but I was a real piker. You're the real McCoy. You're said to be actually the best.
Well, I let other people say that. I don't make that claim. The best is, everybody has a different definition of what the best is. But it's kind of interesting to talk about storm chasing back in the days because, as we didn't have all the laptops and all the technology we have now, which is a totally different type of chasing than you had, 10 or 15 years ago. It's completely changed chasing in the way we chase, and there's good things about it and there's bad things about it. But the technology is really the biggest thing to affect storm chasing and storm spotting, probably in the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, I can say this for you, Warren. When it gets in your blood, it never, ever leaves. We will get an occasional violent storm here, and I'll be watching it on radar scope on my little iPhone 6. Boy, I wish I'd had that back when. And, and I'll be looking for rotation. I'll be out looking at the clouds, and every now and then you get just a little bit of rotation. You go, wow, look at that. And so it never leaves you. Never, ever. It's like radio. It never leaves you.
No, it doesn't. I started out as a newspaper journalist when I got out of college, and even the journalism bug to this day stays with me. If I'm sitting here at night and hear, sirens for more than probably 5 minutes, I'll jump up and grab the scanner.
That's right.
What's going? It's the same thing, and same thing with storms. Even when we have storms here in Tucson, if I see the sky get dark or I look on the radar and there's something out there, I still have that, urge even during the off season to go out. It is a curiosity. I mean, that's why so many people chase. It's a big atmospheric treasure hunt, and boy, once that fever bites you, it's something that's just really hard, if not impossible, to get rid of.
I know, and it's really hard, I think, to describe to people who don't understand it, and that would be some of my audience. But it's a total adrenaline rush. For me, it's like being on the air. I don't know. It's just something you go and do. If something is about to, some roll cloud is about to go by and issue a tornado, you follow until you see it and get. And by the way, folks, when you go to my website, artbell.com, and click on Warren's picture, you're going to see a couple, and you really do want to see these pictures. That tornado, is that your photography?
Oh, yeah. There's three. I believe there's 3 photos on there. There's a tornado in. I believe that was in Kansas, and there's the famous lightning strike that got me started, the one of the lightning strike hitting the oil and gasoline tank farm here in Tucson back in 1987. And there's another shot, which is really kind of a beautiful landscape shot, which was shot in West Texas, there off of I-40.
I see it.
East of Amarillo. And that's just, the clouds are just amazing, the modest clouds and the kind of a purple sunset light on them. The kind of things that, chasers just spend all the money and time out there chasing, looking for.
I saw stuff just like that in Amarillo. Believe me. Yes, these are amazing photographs. And as far as the tornado photograph is concerned, it's one of the best I've ever seen. My goodness, what form.
Well, interestingly, I only shot 2 or 3 photos of that because I had, at the time, I had a 35 millimeter film camera that I had got from an agency in Los Angeles who wanted me to shoot weather. And so I spent most of the time shooting that on 35 millimeter film, which, was one of the first tornadoes actually shot on 35 millimeter film, if I remember right. But, that's always the problem with storm chasing and being both, someone interested in motion footage and someone interested in still images is, how do you handle it when you have something like that on the ground? Do you want to shoot the stills? Do you want to shoot the footage? And over the years, people have preferences. Stills were, of course, at one time the only thing you could really shoot. Video just wasn't of quality. And nowadays with HD cameras, you can shoot some amazing quality footage. So, even though technology is advanced, there's still that, juggling act going on when there's something really amazing happening to decide, what format you want to actually record it on.
Okay, see, I look at that tornado and I say, my God, that is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, and it is. It's just gorgeous. You've got basically what looks like clear sky everywhere else. You've got that giant, ominous cloud above, and from it, the tornado, and it's about as perfectly shaped as I've ever seen.
That's probably one of my favorite shots because it does kind of incorporate all the things you're looking for in a tornado shot, which is really hard to find the color because the sunset light was on it. You don't find that with a lot of tornadoes. It's kind of a gray against gray. And you also had, it was close enough to get a good quality shot. Fortunately, the best thing about that tornado is it didn't do any serious damage or hurt anyone. So, once you hear that and there's nothing bad about it, you can really kick back and enjoy the photograph. It's not like taking some of the images I've taken where, the tornado went on to become a killer tornado or was doing, serious damage because it's really difficult to kind of celebrate, no matter what it looks like, to kind of celebrate those shots when you realize, what it did.
Okay, that brings us to something I want to talk to you about. I said, okay, it's beautiful, and I know that you understood the word beautiful. As our eyes look at it, or if you're a chaser, or if you're interested in violent weather, that is beautiful. But it's a fine line. Now, when I called you up, this may be a story in itself. When I called you up before the show, I, was messing with you, and I said, Tim Cantori. I think you said, I was about to hang up on you. I'll ask you about that in a moment. What I do want to ask about is this. When the violent weather is really going, naturally, I go to the Weather Channel. I think a lot of people do. They get their best ratings when things are worse. And you go over there and, you've got Dr. Forbes on screen. And I really love the guy in a lot of ways. But, he's, on one hand, he's saying, oh, my God, look at this radar scan. You see that blue? That's got to be stuff in the middle of a tornado. And definitely a return of things in the air, and he's getting very excited, very, very excited, and yet he has to stop every, like 3 or 4 minutes and say, but of course, we're not happy about this. No nice way to say that. It could be headed toward a populated area or whatever. So it's such a fine line. If you're a weather freak, you love it. But you can't be seen to love it too much because it does bad stuff. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's always very difficult to watch radars when you have, what we call a damage ball, or you're able to see the reflectivity and the signatures, and it's debris going up in the air, and you can just tell, by looking at GPS or the overlays that it's going to a populated area. I remember one time in Oklahoma City, we had a tornado going through there, and my foot was actually shaking on the accelerator because I realized what I was chasing was obviously killing people at the time.
Yeah.
So there was this excitement, but there was also this kind of anxiety of knowing what you were looking at was doing some real serious damage. But you're right, you have to be careful. And you're talking about Forbes. Dr. Forbes and describing it, and I think I actually remember seeing that same thing. And I think a lot of the excitement is just from the science part of it, that you're witnessing something absolutely, amazing.
Of course.
That if another scientist was sitting next to you, they'd be saying, "Oh my God, you weren't on TV." It would be real exciting. But of course, when you're dealing with the public, then there's a whole different, persona you have to take on because those, what you're looking at may be doing some serious damage or even killing people.
Yeah, Forbes was saying things like, I think this could be the biggest I've ever seen in this kind of return. Biggest ever. So he was trying to suppress scientific excitement. You've got it exactly right. And then impress people, of course, with the danger. That was, and they do warn town after town after town after town. So you don't think, it's not your feeling that there are more tornadoes. There may even be fewer, but you don't think they're more violent, or do you think perhaps yes?
No, when you look at the statistics and you get away with you kind of eliminate all the hearsay science, there really are not more violent tornadoes. Now, in the last few years, because of the drought, one of the interesting things that's happening is the dry line is beginning to form a little bit further to the east, and we can talk about that after the break. But that's a phenomenon that's occurring because of the recent drought that's forcing the storms to go up a little bit further out to the populated areas.
All right, here comes a break, so stand by. My guest is Warren Fadley. He chases storms. You might want to take a look at his vehicle and his dashboard. We'll have him describe that equipment for you. I'm sure it's the latest, the greatest.
Desert doesn't screen calls. We trust you. But remember, the NSA. Well, to call the show, please dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
My favorite by a mile. Welcome, everybody. I've got a storm chaser, the storm chaser, actually. The original storm chaser, best storm chaser, still the best storm chaser. Warren Fadley is my guest, and we're talking weather. And I'm sure you've seen this last tornado season. Things have changed a lot since Warren started chasing, and I was chasing way back when. They've really changed a lot. We're going to talk some about that, but let's get this Cantori thing out of the way. Do you have a bone to pick with Cantori?
Well, not really. I have a love-hate relationship with the Weather Channel. I very gratefully published my book, Storm Chaser, back in the Twister days. Was it 95 around then? Right. So they've been good, but I've had some problems lately with them and what we call chasertainment, which is write that one down. Chasertainment, which refers to instead of delivering weather information that's really going to save someone's life, it's geared more for entertainment. You show the chasers out there doing really dangerous, wacko, unnecessary things.
And there's no shortage of those anymore, right?
Well, yeah, we could talk about that for the next 10 hours, but that's one of the problems. They embraced that, ironically, a couple years ago, and it almost killed their crew when they were out chasing Mike Bettis, the El Reno tornado that ended up unfortunately killing 3 researchers out there. But and I think they learned their lesson because the tornado hunt never resurfaced after that year. But they got really caught up in that chasertainment of promoting chasing this misrepresented as being something legitimate when it's not. And I think a lot of people saw that, and I think it ended up hurting the Weather Channel in the long run that they kind of adopted that as a legitimate way of promoting weather.
Well, look, they're in the ratings business. Like every TV channel up there, they're in the ratings business. And so I get it. But I also get what it drove people to and the danger of it. So I get both sides of it. In other words, look, the Weather Channel needs ratings. It's as simple as that. Now, how far do they go to get ratings? It's not a taxpayer-supported channel. It's not a government-supported channel. They get their money from commercials. So it is indeed a fine line they walk, Warren. A fine line. You think, though, they stepped over it?
I think they stepped over it because when you lose the public's trust and you start showing, again, things that are for entertainment value, not for news value, it actually risks lives because if I'm watching the Weather Channel and there's a tornado heading towards my house, I don't really care what this person or that person is doing chasing it. I want to know, if it's going to affect me. I want to know if I need to take shelter. I want to need to know what I need to do. And, seconds save lives. And if they're going to broadcast that kind of information, they need to spend that time giving people, important information. And, of course, most people turn into local television and the National Weather Service. Those are probably your two best sources when there's some kind of a threat. But to use that angle of entertainment in those situations rubbed a lot of people, I think, the wrong way.
To your point a little bit, when Jim Cantore pulls into a Midwest town somewhere, usually somebody, tells him, "Hey, Cantore, get out of here." They obviously don't want to see him. They know what it means. If he's in town, it probably means bad stuff.
Oh, yeah. Every time we pull into town with a chase truck, we're often run out of town like Frankenstein.
Sure.
The torches and the pitchforks. It does get people's attention. They always want to know, which is kind of interesting, I've always thought, because you can go into an area that people should know better on, say, a high-risk day when there's a higher probability of violent tornadoes, and you'll be filling up the gas tank or something, and someone will always come up and go, they're going to be storms today. And I always kind of look at them and go, if I lived here and it was a high-risk day and a good chance of violent tornadoes, I would probably... no, I wouldn't have to go up and ask them, but,
Have you seen that? I tried this on a guest the other night and hadn't seen it. Have you seen that commercial of the horror movie spoof where the guy is, where they're going through, let's run to the running car.
That's great,
and the guy in the background is just kind of shaking his head.
Right.
No, behind the chainsaws, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, logic, and I always tell people are asking me, of course, how to survive storms and what you should do, and we can certainly talk more about that later.
We will, yes.
One of the things I've noticed over the years, which I've tried to convey to people when I do lectures and speaking engagements and things like that, is that I don't care how well organized you are, and I'll say this even to myself, when you get in a real serious, and I mean life-threatening situation, the thing that's going to save you are the instincts, are the things that you have burned so much into your memory and your preparations that you're going to take the right steps. Because we all hear the safety instructions every year what to do if there's a hurricane or a tornado. But people will always tell me, and I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen end up in tragic results, when people are faced with that, and panic sets in, that all goes away. That instantly is completely erased, and it's that's what creates panic, and that's why you have so many people who don't need to perish in severe weather events that do.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a little scenario. You know what scares me the most is what I cannot see, Warren. I just can't imagine being in a wood structure somewhere in the Midwest, have it be way after dark, and hear that damn freight train sound. If I know where a storm is, and I can look at the clouds, I can look at the storm, like you, perhaps not like many people, I can kind of tell what's going on, but oh man, to hear that sound in the dark, I can't think of anything more frightening.
Well, the sound would certainly frighten you, but I've been in over the years in numerous situations especially back before we had radar and good communication information, where we would stay in flimsy, cheap, motels.
Yeah, of course.
And lo and behold, you'd hear the tornado siren going off, and you'd see the funnel clouds illuminated by the lightning, and it was always a threat. And it's a very hopeless feeling. And of course, I usually will look over a building, and before I stay there, even nowadays, and know where the shelter is, know where the exits are, and things like that for safety. But I've been caught in those situations, and I'll tell you what, at some point you just submit and you cross your fingers and find the safest place you can, and the rest is purely luck.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you said about the dry line moving east of where it used to be. I think you're right about that. I do. So many of these storms now seem to be happening east of where they used to be. Amarillo gets them every now and then, but not nearly as... it used to be the center of Tornado Alley. Now it's way east. What's going on?
Well, a lot of this is because of the drought, and what happens is you have an area called, it's a boundary called a dry line, and it separates the dry air from the moist air, and it's a breeding ground for storms. They like to go up along that boundary. And generally, it's somewhere, Amarillo or just to the east of there, and a lot of times it's not as defined, and you just don't have the moisture depth, and you'll have storms go up, and then they'll go up, and further down east, it'll stabilize things in the afternoon, and you may have a few tornadoes. That's a very common scenario out there. With the drought, though, you have a real sharp dry line that ends up being, maybe 40, 50 miles to the west of Oklahoma City, for example. And that becomes a very active area. And you have a lot of very violent storms go up. And unfortunately, when they move, 30, 40 miles to the east, they're right in the Oklahoma City area, which we've seen, with Moore and with El Reno, these very violent EF5 tornadoes recently. And that's one of the results of the drought is you have these storms maturing, coming off the dry line and moving into the populated areas there.
How many were killed in the El Reno storm?
I believe it was 4 or 5. I know there were 3 of the research chasers were killed, and there was another guy stopped on the road to photograph the storm with his iPhone, and maybe another person, but I know 4 for sure. But I'll tell you what, that was a miracle. When I was watching that storm on radar, I remember at one point we were south of it, and we saw it at the ending stages, and I remember getting on the radio and telling someone, I go, we're no longer, chasing. We're going to go in as, EMS people. I'm a tactical EMT. I've got a lot of medical training. So at that point, I had changed my mind to transition from, journalist chaser into going into the city, because I'll tell you what, that storm, it's a miracle that it dissipated. Had it kept the track and gone down I-40 into Oklahoma City, and at the strength it was, at its maximum strength, that would have been an extremely, worst case scenario, destructive tornado. So although it had some tragic consequences, it could have been a lot worse.
What did they do wrong, if anything, the ones that got killed?
Nobody knows for sure, and if they do, they're not saying anything. There was rumors that there was a camera rolling at the time, and I don't know if it matters or not. The road was wet. The tornado expanded rapidly. I think there's any number of people that could have been in trouble in that area. The Weather Channel vehicle was hit, as we discussed before, because the tornado expanded, and it's just gigantic monster in just record time.
So was that it, or did it actually take a jog? The story I heard at the time was it jogged suddenly. Yes.
It did both of those things. It actually turned to the north, I believe it was the northeast, rapidly, which they sometimes will do. And I think, you just get caught off guard. I don't care how good you are. It's happened to me. It's happened to, some of the most experienced chasers in the world. Those guys were just unlucky. And I think, between the mud, slick roads and running out of options in that situation, it could have happened to anybody. And there were a lot of close calls that day. If you look at some of the GPS data with the storm chasers and spotters who were in that area, you just cringe to see the little, dots, and you put the tornado track over that of where they were at certain times. So that's just, unfortunately, one of the things that happens with chasing is it's even with all the modern technology, you're still limited to roads, and some of the roads are the same roads that were there long before the technology, and that's really, when I chase, the roads to me are the most important thing, the mapping to be able to maneuver around these storms and to be able to allow for those rapid changes. Now, I know they needed to be a little bit closer for their research, and then that's when it really gets dangerous, is when you're in that area, where you between the very, very large hail and the actual tornadic circulation, you don't have many options. You can, of course, drive into the hail, but that storm was just absolutely, just a beast.
Yes. Other than the adrenaline junkie part of it, which I totally get, why chase storms?
Well, for me, I always had a fascination with several things that got me going. One was, adventure. And of course, I think I was a product of the late 1960s, and the Everest climbs and the moonshots and all these things. As a kid, I'm like, holy moly, I've got to go out someday and do something like that. And I think that was what really kind of got me started. And I was always the kind of kid that was always out in the desert looking for things and, collecting rocks and scorpions and all kinds of crazy, dangerous things. And as I grew up, it translated in. Of course, I wanted to fly for the Navy. That's the sole reason I went to college. But unfortunately, my junior year, my eyesight was just below the standard. So I thought, well, I've got to do something else crazy. Why not do photojournalism and specialize in the most extreme things in the world? And I started out with riots and fires and floods and all kinds of disasters, and then took some pretty good photos and transitioned into lightning here in Arizona, and just happened to be reading an Associated Press article one day about tornado chasing, and I went, I think I'll expand my horizons and head out east.
And this was at what age?
This was, I think I was in my mid to late 20s at this point.
Okay.
And then, of course, went to, ironically, the very first day I went tornado chasing in Texas, I ended up in Saragossa, Texas, which was hit by a very strong tornado that killed, unfortunately, a lot of children during a graduation ceremony.
Oh, God, I remember.
And being there and seeing that, it humbled me a lot. It also told me I'm going to have to give something back. I can't just go out here like you see a lot of chasers and just have a wild, crazy time doing this. I had to give something back, and that doesn't mean I, didn't have crazy, experiences chasing and did a lot of crazy things and some foolish things, but I wanted to give something back to chasing, and I think that's where eventually all the knowledge I got from this firsthand survival I put into writing books and doing lectures and becoming an EMT, so I could do something when I'm out there. Just besides taking the pictures and the footage, I wanted to give something back when I'm out there, and I'm glad I did, because I'll tell you what, it's a great feeling when you go out there and you're able to lend a hand to somebody.
Okay. I'm getting messages all the time on the computer as I do the show. People are asking that you would describe what they can see in photograph equipment-wise in your vehicle.
Well, I don't have that picture up. I don't want to risk it here and mess up the phone by turning the computer back on. But there's an iPad up on the front windshield, which is attached with a suction cup, and that I use mainly for mapping and radar.
Okay.
And there is also a satellite GPS unit on the dash, and that's because you can't always rely on phone lines when you're out there in the middle of nowhere. So even if I don't have phone lines, I have a satellite that'll give me a map and a radar, which is very important.
Yes.
There's radios. We don't use radios much anymore to communicate with weather service. There are still some spotters that use the ham frequency. In the old days, that was the way we spotted, was on the 2 meter and 440 ham network. But
as a licensed ham, of course.
Right, of course. And there's, obviously my cell phone's in there, and there's a camera mounted on the front. There's usually 2 cameras in the front. Sometimes I'll have one pointed back towards me, but there's always one kind of a wide view out front we can turn on, and there's a monitor for that. There's a handheld camera that comes off that you can actually hold and watch the monitor when you're driving, so you don't have to actually look through the camera. You can use that on there. And I'm trying to think what else was on there. That's the main main equipment I use. I don't get too technical and put too much technology in there because it's easy to get distracted. If you have too many things going on, too many bells and whistles, it's easy to get caught up in all that. And I'm also a pilot, so I know that, you don't want to get caught up in the moment and lose track of what you're supposed to be doing, which is, flying the plane, or in this case, driving the chase vehicle.
You ever wonder at all about the size of the cojones of that pilot in Oklahoma City who is constantly up when tornadoes are in the area taking video? Now, I grant you, he generally gets out to what he considers to be a safe distance, but man, I'll tell you, I wonder about that guy. That'd be quite a job as a helicopter pilot. You can't make wrong decisions in a helicopter in that kind of weather.
Well, no, you can't. I tip my hat to those guys because the information they give, and the news stations in Oklahoma City, the life-saving information they give has saved countless lives. And although, I don't think some of the entertainment value that they generate now, which seems to be more and more every year, but the information value they send from those helicopters is invaluable, not only to the people on the ground, but to the National Weather Service. Allows them to see what's going on at the same time they're looking at the radar. But yeah, all that technology has a very good purpose. But unfortunately, in recent years, some of it's getting a little bit out of hand where it's becoming more entertainment value. And I can give you a great example is when I was at the Moore tornado.
Okay, hold that thought. Entertainment value. The Moore tornado, man. All right, so my guest is Warren Fadley. He's a storm chaser, the storm chaser, the original storm chaser. We're talking about violent weather. Right now, actually, tornadoes. I'm Art Bell.
The clock strikes 12, and midnight in the desert is pounding packets your way on the Dark Matter Digital Network. To call the show, please direct your finger digits to dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
Warren Fadley is my guest. He chases storms. He is said to be the best. That's what you're hearing. And we were talking about entertainment value, I believe. Right, Warren?
Yeah, we were talking about how technology and social media have changed, the way that people get their warning information, and it's a great thing. It saves lives, but at the same time, one of the things that's happening, which is a very negative thing now, is people are relying too much on that information. And I'll give you a great example. In Moore, Oklahoma, when they were recently hit by that violent tornado, I spoke to somebody, and he said, well, I was watching TV. And I wanted to get confirmation that it was a big tornado and it was heading towards my house. And he barely got out alive. I mean, this guy, his home was completely leveled. And he only got about a half a mile away from it when he found shelter. If he'd waited any later, he probably would have been killed. But this is a growing problem now, that people they're relying too much on others to tell them what to do. And they're watching live footage and trying to correlate that with the strength of the tornado and where it's moving. And most people don't have the knowledge to do that. So the bottom line is they're taking too long to seek shelter or take the action they need to take to save their lives. And, there is that entertainment value. I've had people tell me, well, gosh, I was watching it on TV and it looked really cool, but I didn't realize how close it was getting to me. So that's one of the things I think we're going to have to see people change in weather safety training and discussions, is to get people. It doesn't matter what a tornado, if it's an EF0 or if it's an EF5, if it's heading towards you, you need to take the same kind of precaution you would take for any kind of tornado, and you need to not delay that action, and you need to, especially if you have a family or are responsible for other people, you really need to do that as quickly as you can.
Which is not at all what chasers do.
No, chasers don't do that. It's the chasers are going to be out there, let me tell you. And chasers do, chasers and spotters. We always talk about chasers, but really the unsung heroes of when you talk about people being actively involved in severe weather. You've got the researchers, which of course you can't deny their research leads to a lot of life-saving information. At least the real researchers, not the fake ones, which we can certainly talk about at some point. But the spotters really don't get enough credit. I mean, these are men and women. They go out with their own vehicles, and as you probably know from chasing, a lot of times their vehicles are beat to a pulp by giant hail. They spend their own gas money. It's strictly a public service. They don't get anything out of it. They rarely ever get a thank you from anyone. But I've heard so many spotter reports over the years when I've been chasing, giving back life-saving information to the National Weather Service, that I think we need to designate a National Spotter Day, which I'm actually working right now on doing, to give credit to those people for being out there and providing that kind of information.
All right, let's take a moment and just stop talking about this aspect of it. We'll come back to it and give people your best advice, and that is when you're going to have it's forecasted now fairly accurately, I believe, Warren, when we're going to have a bad day. If you live in Oklahoma or somewhere out in the plains, they know ahead of time. In fact, I believe Dutch Forbes has taken to creating the Torcon scale, which is the likelihood of a tornado being within, 50 miles of you or something like that, on a scale of 1 to 5, is it? Something like that.
Yeah,
it's 1 to 10.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that.
No.
Created. I mean, Forbes is a great guy. Trust me, he's one of the best people they have there. I respect the heck out of him, but I don't agree with that system. It just confuses people. There's already enough systems. What I tell people, and this isn't obviously a predictability, but the thing I've developed over the years, I call it the triangle of survival. And at the top of that triangle is to know the danger.
Right.
Know the danger where you live. And people will say, well, I live in Tornado Alley. Okay, well, do you live near, train tracks? You might have a derailment. Do you have flooding in the area? So the most important thing is to know for your area what kind of dangers you have, from A to Z, wildfires, whatever. The second thing is know what to do. If it's a tornado, you need to know what kind of, where the nearest shelter is, or have one in your house. And the final thing is you need to take action right away. You don't delay. Those three things will save probably 90% or more of the people who are threatened by severe weather. But somewhere along that triangle, people make a critical mistake. They don't know the danger, they don't know what to do, or they don't take action, and it leads to, bad consequences.
I think hands down, the safest place to be is underground, right?
Underground. Yeah, I mean, you can't always predict tornado strength. And I know that some people now, I've watched some of the forecasts in some of the major cities, and the meteorologists will say, well, this right now on radar looks like it's going to be an EF 1 or 2, and I just cringe. Yeah, if you're a chaser, you could probably look at, the velocity scans and figure out the shear and things like that, and look at it and think, well, yeah, this is probably going to be a weak tornado or maybe a strong tornado. But I think it's a mistake to relay to people that you're thinking it's going to be an EF 1 or 2, because it goes back to what I was saying before, is people will stop taking shelter. They'll say, well, it's just an EF 1, that'll knock my lawn chair, over out front. I don't really care. And they won't take shelter, which is a big mistake. You don't want to do that. The best option is to always take the same type of action you would take, no matter what the tornado is or what they think it's going to be, and that is underground, like you said. That is always the safest place to be, is an underground, some kind of a approved shelter, and that's your best chance of surviving a tornado is underground, especially the violent ones.
And if not, at least jump into an unapproved ditch.
Yeah, there are some above ground shelters, though, that are FEMA approved that can withstand some very violent tornadoes. That's another option. You can put one of those in your house and use it as a safe the rest of the year. But you need to have some kind of shelter if there's a tornado. That's the only real way you're going to survive.
All right. What is the strongest wind that has been recorded in an F5? The biggest tornado. Do we know, or are we still imagining?
Well, they've exceeded 300 miles an hour, and they've done this using portable Doppler radars, which is great because they're able to go out to take the radar to the storm instead of letting the storm come to the radar. And a lot of the folks at NCAR, which is in Colorado, and the University of Oklahoma, and there's probably 3 or 4 more research groups that use portable Dopplers go out. And they've measured winds well over 300 miles per hour and documented those, which is absolutely incredible. I was on a tornado near Red Rock. I don't recall the exact wind speed. I know it was over 300 miles an hour, but that's just an incredible amount of destruction. And that's just the winds, that they've measured. I'm sure they can probably top out a little bit higher than that.
300 miles an hour take virtually anything down to the ground, including concrete?
Some of it. It depends. Tornadoes are made up of individual vortices, and it just depends on how strong those vortices are and what they hit. And, of course, that's why you'll have the house across the street will be standing, and then the other house will be completely demolished. But with your very strong, your very wide tornadoes, those usually leave a very wide path of destruction almost within that whole area where the actual tornado's in contact with the ground.
Okay, so here's a question for you. One day, an EF5 is going to hit a big city, something like Dallas, Fort Worth, or Oklahoma City, or, downtown high-rise type area. What will that do?
Well, it depends on, when you say it depends on the size of the tornado, it depends on what kind of structures it hits. But if you're talking about a downtown area, you're talking about the biggest danger is going to be glass, flying glass from that tornado. It's unlike you're going to see skyscrapers taken down. You may have some buildings that are not as strong, some of the 1 or 2 story buildings near the street destroyed, but you're also going to have the compression of winds, the Venturi effect between the buildings compressing air. So you may have some just absolutely insane velocities doing a lot of destruction, but you're going to have a lot of debris, things coming off buildings, cars being hurled into buildings. But again, the biggest danger is going to be windows breaking and that glass just flying all over the place in a major city.
What I'm going to ask you is for speculation right now. Would that be all right?
Oh, sure.
So, we have speculated for years about weather control. And I've often wondered, Warren, if it might be possible, if something is out going across the plains, even a big tornado, if it might not be possible, if it was headed toward a city, to do something to that tornado. I don't know whether you could detonate something big and either disperse it or change its path or control it in some way. I'm sure you've wondered and thought about weather control. Is anything like that possible?
Not with the technology we have today. There's nothing you can do to, tornadoes, the storms, the supercells that spawn them are very, very large storms or large, systems. The tornado is actually a very, very small portion of that storm in the actual circulation. The mesocyclone, which is the rotating part, the core of the storm that's actually producing the tornado in most cases, is a very large, covers a very large area within inside the storm. So you would have to disrupt that, or you would have to have some kind of vehicle very close to the tornado to figure out. And people have talked about using laser beams, and trust me, these are some of the messages I get that just crack me up. I mean, laser beams and building. There was a gentleman I think about a year ago, proposed building a wall around Oklahoma City to try to stop the circulation. None of these things are really, maybe Donald Trump.
Only good if you could get Texas to pay for it.
Well, yeah, there you go. Oh boy, I hope he's not listening. He'll be after me tomorrow. But yeah, all these things. It would take a lot of energy. I mean, just the physics of it to overcome something like that. You would have to have something that we simply don't have the technology. I think if it's ever going to happen, it would be something where they figure out a way to actually reduce the strength of the overall storm and probably prevent it from producing a tornado. It would probably be difficult in itself, but that would probably be a more logical approach.
All right.
And I did go back and check the Red Rock tornado. I want to get this right. It was I believe it was 270 70 miles an hour.
Yeah,
The speed they measured.
that's horrible. Really horrible.
A lot of damage.
And again, the country I lived in for quite a number of years is the Philippines. They are getting typhoons now that are said. In fact, they also said it of the one off Baja not long ago, right? Or down further in Mexico, the one that blew up in virtually one day to a Cat 5, and then the opposite occurred, and it virtually dissipated in a day.
You're talking about the one that hit Mexico. I believe that was it Patricia?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's correct. A very weird storm.
Yeah, well, the thing about that storm was it went from being a hurricane, or from being a tropical storm to a hurricane, a very powerful hurricane. I think it was less than 24 hours.
That's it.
So, when you have that kind of energy in a hurricane, that's really spooky. The only thing that really saved everybody in that hurricane was a couple of things. One, it moved relatively quick. It didn't sit there and spin on the coast. And the core of the greatest winds was only, I believe, when it went on shore, maybe 20, maybe 30, 35 miles wide at the most. So there was and it went in between really two populated areas. So they really lucked out with that.
They said that was the lowest barometric pressure they had ever measured.
In a hurricane. There has been a lower pressure. I believe it was Hurricane Tip in 1979, if I remember right. That was actually lower. If you're talking about just cyclones in general around the world, of course that was a typhoon. Right.
Typhoons I'm terribly familiar with, too familiar with, and the Philippines gets hit, or within the Philippine area of the responsibility, about 20 to 22 a year. It's incredible. And they seem like they're getting stronger.
And with that, we will leave Art Bell and Warren for tonight. Come on back for more tomorrow night as we will continue. But for this, we will bring ourselves to a close. As always, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe as we rock on this overnight and every overnight here from day one. Have a great night, and as always, release the Kraken.